Yuri is the author of the popular Angular Meteor library. He's an experienced Angular developer and speaker, and he owns a small development company that uses Angular Meteor as their infrastructure. Last November, his proposal to speak at the official Angular conference became the conference's most upvoted talk submission, and he'll be speaking there next week. Please welcome Uri.
Hi, I'm Uri, and Sam said everything about me, I guess. I'll start with a question. Who here hates Angular? Okay, good. So my goal for this talk is to convince you that Angular is good for Meteor, but not in the way you think it is. So I'm not going to persuade you that Angular is better than Blaze. I'm going to persuade you that the Angular Meteor project is good for the Meteor community. So it's going to be a tough, an ambitious goal. So I'm Uri. I own like a small. I've been an Angular developer for like maybe 3 years. I've done a lot. I gave a talk. My first Angular talk was at Google, and there were 15 people, and nobody knew what Angular is. So, and I had a short hair and no beard, so it's been a while. So why did I do it? So first of all, as I said, I own a small like dev shop, and we tried all kinds of technologies. And also, I used to be a consultant, so Angular was always good for us. Like we never thought like we need to change that. It just works. Maybe we won't argue right now if Angular is good or not, but for us it was good. The problem was the backend. We always moved, we tried everything. Like I came from a C++ background, then .NET, then afterward Java, then later on I moved to PHP with Symfony and CodeIgniter, then later on Ruby on Rails, then Node with Express, then Node with Happy. I've been through a lot, but always Angular was there. Also, as a consultant, Angular was my way of helping big companies to move their old backends into a little bit more new ones, like persuade them to move into Node. And what happens there usually is that they have like this really big backend in Java or whatever, and in Angular, everything is like super fast compared to that. So there's more and more logic going into the front end. And I think this is something very similar that happens in a lot of those use cases, and then it's easier to move the Ruby or whatever code into Node, or any other backend that you have. So I still wasn't, even if the last framework I used was Happy.js, I still wasn't happy, and I haven't, it was a mistake now. I haven't planned it. So, and for 2 years, I think it's been 2 years since I heard about Meteor. And for me, I was sure that Meteor and Angular are going to work together. Because it was the philosophy was so similar, and I said, oh, cool, so somebody will do it. And nobody did that. So after I was really, really frustrated with the last project's backend, I said, okay, the new project that I'm going to do, I'm going to just try to use Angular and Meteor. So why is it so painful for us as Angular developers, and why do we need Meteor? So in Angular, I don't want to talk so much about Angular, but in Angular, you have two-way data binding, and the work with data is really, really easy. But then you get to sync it with your backend, and there's all kinds of REST solutions and stacks, which are okay, but I don't need to tell you why it's not optimal. And there's all kinds of real-time server, like real-time data synchronization solutions, but they're solutions. They're not giving you like what Meteor gives you, that's like the whole platform, open source, that you can get everything from start to end. So Meteor is good for us, but we have a lot of Angular code. We have a lot of Angular knowledge. I have a team of people that are really strong with Angular, and we feel okay with Angular. We like it a lot. We have a lot of libraries and packages that we use. And also, learning a new technology is always hard, right? Doesn't matter how easy Meteor is, it's still hard to move people from like their existing knowledge into a new knowledge. So there needs to be like a migration path, like something that you can start with your own knowledge and flow into the new system. So why should you care, right? Because I'm not talking in the edgy code here, I'm talking in Meteor. So first of all, like me, there's a lot of us, right? Like, I don't think if you think it is good or not, but there's a lot of Angular developers. And not only that, our problems are very similar, to go into Meteor are very similar to other people's problems to go into Meteor, right? It doesn't matter if you're an Ember developer or a PHP developer. You want to have like a migration, someone that will explain in your own words what Meteor is. So I will show you how we did that, and maybe it will help you to do the same with other technologies and eventually bring everyone into Meteor, which I think is the biggest task, right? Meteor has a really, really good way of thinking about web architecture. And if you will have Angular developers using the Meteor architecture, if you have Ember developers using the Meteor architecture, then it's the big goal this is the biggest goal. Later on, if you have Angular developers on top of Meteor, it's also easier for them to learn Blaze, and it's also easier for Blaze people to understand what Angular maybe does better than Blaze. So it's always good to have more opinions and more people in your community. So what are we actually doing? So first of all, we need to actually import the Angularjs library, which is just a regular, like a very big JavaScript file, into Meteor. So we have 3 ways of doing that. One is just manually placing it in the package, and that's okay. The second way is to use a Meteor Bowers package, which is a nice package, and we use that for a long time, but it has all kinds of problems. I won't go into that right now, but it's not working flawlessly, unfortunately. The third way is to actually create an official Meteor package for Angular. So I don't know if some of you, probably most of you heard Dan DeV's talk about packaging, official packaging. Oh, he's here. Good job. So of making more and more third-party applications ready as an official Meteor packages. If you haven't saw the talk, I think you should. So we do that, right? So until now, we used to bring Angular with Meteor Bower. Now I've created this AngularJS organization under the Meteor organization, and this organization publish AngularJS library every time it goes. And we also do it now with third-party libraries. Actually, today, my pull request for Angular Google Maps got merged. So Angular Google Maps already has an official support for Meteor. The second thing we need to do is to actually run Angularjs templates. When you can see with the simplest Angularjs example, there's already a problem because Angularjs use double curly braces, which is very similar to Blaze, and this thing is not gonna work because Blaze gonna compile that before Angular does. So there's 3 ways of doing that. One is Angular actually has a very nice ability to change the default delimiters. So I can and this is what we did at the beginning, we just changed Angular delimiters to square brackets, and then it's not colliding. It's nice, but the problem is first you need to change all your templates from curly braces into square brackets, and the second thing that all your third-party libraries, if they have templates, are not gonna work. So the second possible solution is to just go into Meteor's templating package. That's the package that, if you don't know, that's the package, the default package that runs over all the HTML, takes all the bodies and put them in body, takes all the templates and put them in templates, and then also calls the Blaze compiler. So we can just override it, or we can just create a default, like a different build process, kind of like CoffeeScript does, or Jade, maybe similar, and for files that are non-HTML. So this is what we did. Right now, if you're using an Angular template, instead of using .html, you're using .ng.html, and everything works. the most important thing is to sync the data. And this is also the most interesting part. So there's all kinds of ways of doing that. We have data on the scope that Angular watches, and we have the cursor, the Mongo cursor that Meteor handles everything that reactively that this cursor will be updated. So first of all, getting the Angular data into Meteor. So we need to observe the changes. So Angular has a watch function. Everything under scope is watched by Angular. So that's nice. The most easiest way of implementing this is just put your Angular collection under watch, and every time it changes, save that whole collection into Meteor. That's okay, but if your collection gets larger, the performance are not going to be that good. So the second solution is actually what we did is we are using the Meteor's observe sequence package, which is also, it's a package of Meteor that observes plain JavaScript objects, and you can send it like an old object and a new object, and you will get with an observe API of what happened. So we're actually using Meteor's object, and then we get just the section of the collection that actually changed. I'll show it in a second. Then the Meteor, syncing the Meteor collection to Angular is a little bit the same. We can use like tracker autorun, and just like every time that all the collection is changing, saving that whole collection inside the Angular. Or what we are doing right now, we're using the observe changes API. So we're changing just the specific parts that change. So when we do this, when we do the observe changes API, we're actually working since we did that change, we're working exactly like Blaze. So Angular is no longer like this patch over Blaze, over Meteor. Like right now, the way that data is handled in Angular Meteor is exactly the way that Blaze is working. So it says a lot about Meteor and its ability to be open, and this is and it's a good story to tell to people from outside. On top of that, you can have actions. So if I don't want everything updating automatically, I can just use like save function, remove functions, and we added promise support. A little bit of how it looks. So I know you don't like Angular code, so I won't show you too much, but usually, what you would need to do in Angular is that you have scope parties. This is just a plain JavaScript object of parties, and Angular will watch that. The only thing you need to do to just bind it into the complete stack is to just call a service and send the Mongo collection into it. Parties on the right side are just regular Mongo collection, and that's it. Right now, everything that will happen on the parties collection will be synced into Angular and the other way around. If you don't want to automatically watch all the time with Angular on your parties, then you can just send a flag false on the second argument, and then you'll have just the very simple API like save a new party, and we also added the promises. So you get promise with the change docs, or if there's an error, you get a promise. The interesting thing about it is that we're actually sending the Mongo collection is just a shorthand. We're using the cursor to observe changes. So it means that you can send Meteor collection a cursor, right? So we can write parties.find whatever and do any query we want, and that query will we will reactively watch that query. So how do we do that? Like I said before, I'll just go through it fast. So sorry for all that Angular code, but root scope is just, everything is under scope. We're watching our collection. And then we're sending the old results and the new results into diff array. Diff array is a function from Meteor's observe sequence. And this is exactly how Blaze each works to understand exactly what happened. So we do the same, and we just get an API of what's changed. When we get the change, we're actually reverting it. We're reverting the change in Angular and just updating the mini Mongo. And why are we doing that? Is because right now, when we do that, we work exactly like Blaze. So our only source of truth is no longer the Angular JavaScript object is actually mini-Mongo. Everything that happens on the mini-Mongo and every query that we run on the mini-Mongo, that's our source of truth. And this is why Angular Meteor works much more similar to Blaze than from Angular. And on the other way around, we just take the cursor, do observe changes. This is, of course, a pseudocode, right? It's not like the code itself, but we're just updating what's actually happened. We do the same for single object, kind of like find one, right? I can send an ID, and I can do the same with that. And if it's a form, I can save and reset it. Another thing we're doing is that we want to use, we haven't overridden the templating, so we still have all of Blaze with us. So if we're now using just a regular, if you want to use, let's say, login buttons or any other template, Blaze template, you just call that directive that we wrote, and it will render it with Blaze. It will render with data, and you can use Blaze inside Angular as much as you want. So you don't need to choose which third-party libraries you need to work with. The last thing we did is we just created services for everything that Meteor gives us on the client side. So we created those services to, first of all, make a promise support for those, because I want to work in an asynchronous way on the client, and also give every action that I'm doing the context of scope, so Angular will be aware of everything that's happening. And also we did it in the most similar way that we can use with Meteor syntax. So when people work with Angular Meteor, they understand Meteor, and they won't have later on problems to use Blaze or whatever. So we have a subscribe service, we have a method service, we have a user service, and one of the most important things is that we have like a reactivity service. What does it mean? It means that right now Angular watches over everything that happens in Angular. Meteor watches over everything that happens in Meteor with autorun, but they're not synced. So we created this service or this function that helps you make the scope, Angular scope, reactive. So every time the Angular variable changes, it fires a reactive change event. So if you do tracker autorun, it will do the same as it does with Meteor. And also the other way around. If you run just Meteor autorun, Angular will be aware of what's happening inside. The best way to look at it is like the search, sort, and paginate example, which there is in our tutorial. This is like a chunk of code of that explains how it's all working. So I'll try to go to it like really fast. So you have Meteor autorun, which is exactly like tracker autorun. It's just that everything that will happen inside, Angular knows that it's happening. You have Meteor subscribe, which is exactly like, you have $Meteor subscribe, which is exactly like Meteor subscribe. The same parameters, the same everything. The only difference is that you get a promise. So when the subscription is ready, you get a promise with the subscription handler. You know that now everything you needed happened here. Then you can also, that promise can be associated with the router. And then you can stop the subscription if you need. And the last thing that's happening here is that every time, all those get reactively parameters are Angular parameters. Every time they change, let's say if I'm typing a search, then every time it changes, Meteor understands that something happened, even though it's Angular variable, and it will rerun the autorun. So I'll have like immediate search. Like Angular's one of the first like examples of Angular is immediate search, but it's not going anywhere. It's just on the client. So
we're at time.
Oh shit. Okay. So I'll just finish quickly. So we can always like Angular Meteor has it like really. You can use any Angular third-party library that you want without. You can use Famous. You can use Ionic, whatever you want. About the future. Right now, I'm publishing the AngularJS libraries. I'm trying to get it into the Angular team to do that. I'm here to help with building other frameworks like Ember, Meteor, or stuff like that, if anyone is, because it probably will be very similar. In a week, I'm going to talk in the ngConf. I met with the Angular team for a week now to work on Angular 2.0, which is very interesting what they did there, and it's good for Meteor because Angular 2.0 is much more similar in my ideas for Blaze than from Angular 1. That's it. So just spread the word for your friends out there that using Angular, that you can use Angular with Meteor, and then later on convince them, after they're already in Meteor, convince them to move to Blaze if you want. Thank you.